In this video, we will be looking at object-oriented programming and the production of pseudocode solutions to meet the needs of exam questions. So let's now look at the detail of the exam question. Vehicles is the generic name given to types of motorized transport that use roads each day. Some common characteristics include the annual tax cost. Does the vehicle have valid insurance? And the name of the registered keeper. And the task in front of us today is to write the pseudocode constructor for the class vehicle. So let's now just look at this diagram here. This is known as a UML class diagram, and it defines the structure of a class. Class diagrams are static in nature, meaning that they don't change, and we know that objects are created from classes. So let's look at the three parts of our UML class diagram. We have the vehicle class name. We then have the attributes of the class, and we have the class's methods. Notice that each of the attributes has been identified as being private. This promotes encapsulation, which means that they are only visible and accessible by using accessor and mutator methods within the class itself. So if we have a look at these two methods here, we have set annual tax cost. This is a mutator method because it's changing the contents of the field annual tax cost. So if we wish to change the data that was stored within the field annual tax cost, we must call the public function set annual tax cost, giving it the parameter of the annual tax cost to be set within the attribute. Notice that the methods are public. That means these are accessible inside and outside of the object when it is created. Fields are encapsulated as private and can only be accessed through the setter methods, such as set annual tax cost, or the accessor methods, such as get annual tax cost. So we can see here that get annual tax cost does not require any parameters, but it does have a return type, and it's returning the data type of float, because that is the data type of the annual tax cost. So just to clarify, setter methods are sometimes known as mutators. They change the state of fields. They change the contents of data within a field. Getter methods, also known as accessor methods, retrieve the contents of the data stored within a field. Generically speaking, we will find that all methods are public. There are some exceptions which won't be covered within this video. So our question is asking us to write the pseudocode for the constructor of the vehicle class. So let's look at the definition of the constructor class. It's public. That means it can be called outside of the class. We use the definition new to identify the creation of a new object from this class. It then includes the parameters it would require to set up the data within the attributes on the first creation of the object. So it's this method here that we are going to focus on within this video. So now let's look at writing the pseudocode for this constructor method for the vehicle class. So now let's look at the pseudocode implementation for the constructor method of the vehicle class. So on line 7, we can see the constructor header. It is public because it needs to be able to be accessed outside of the class. It's a procedure because it doesn't return a value. It uses the word new to identify itself as a constructor. It has 3 parameters: P annual tax cost, P valid insurance, and P keeper. I use the prefix of P to remind myself I'm dealing with a parameter. So on line 8, we can see that we have took the first parameter and assigned it to the first field. And the same with valid insurance, and the same with P keeper. So we're taking all 3 parameters and we are assigning them to the attributes, which is sometimes known as fields, within the object. Notice the code's indented to give good code structure to our solution, and we have an end procedure. Now, it's not within the question, but let's take a situation where the constructor of a vehicle class had a field called mileage. If this was a new vehicle, the mileage would be 0. There would be no point in using a parameter to send 0 to be then put in as a parameter to initialize the field or attribute of mileage of 0. That would be inefficient. So if we're sending in data that will never change, then that data can be hard-coded. In this case, look, you can see that I've initialized the field to 0. So don't use a parameter to send mileage in where the mileage would never change, and in this case a new vehicle would have 0 miles. If we were creating vehicles that did have variable mileage, in other words used vehicles, then we would use a parameter to initialize mileage. But that isn't within our class diagram of our initial question, but it's a very worthy note because a lot of pupils make that mistake of passing static data, in other words data that's never going to change, into a constructor, and they lose marks in exam questions because of it.